Hey everyone. So back in July, I created a YouTube video showing you how to create a CSS variable-based framework using AI in Bricks. I thought I'd revisit this from a simpler approach because a lot of people are getting confused by what a framework is, where you'd use it, why you'd use it. And there are some great frameworks out there that you should be using, like Automatic CSS, Core Framework, Advanced Schema Framework or ATF, and many, many more. The choice of which one you use really comes down to you and how you work and what works for you and your team. I would certainly encourage you to use a framework and stick to that framework so that you know what you're doing, your team knows what you're doing, it's maintainable, it's scalable, and it just makes sense. Now, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to build up a very simple framework of variables in Bricks and show where and why it's useful. And that will probably help you understand how these other frameworks work anyway. We won't go into the depth that these other frameworks go into. We'll just do some spacing. We'll do some basics. We won't do any typography or anything like that because that is something that's going to take a lot of time. But we're just going to do some basics and show you why you need this in the first place. So what I've got here is a very straight Bricks install with instant images, just so we can get some stock images, WP reset, just so we can return back to a base point. And in my appearance, I have Bricks with a child theme installed, and that's it, nothing else. So if I go into my pages, this is where you would be if you first installed WordPress, installed Bricks, and you've done nothing else. You haven't bought any plugins, haven't installed any plugins, and you haven't bought any frameworks. So I'm going to hit the add page. Let's call this demo and edit that with Bricks. So this is our first look at the Bricks editor with nothing else set up. What we'll look at, if we go into our themes, we have no theme there. If we go into our CSS classes and variables, we have nothing there. It's completely empty. If you use a framework, you will have things in there generally that you can use, but we're starting with absolutely nothing. So the first thing we have to do is go into our settings, go into our theme styles, and we need to create a theme. I'm just going to call it demo. The conditions by default are for the entire website. Now this is a Bricks settings theme, not the Bricks theme, the WordPress theme. So it gets confusing in terminology where your Bricks editor or Bricks builder is a theme which you install into WordPress. These themes are themes within Bricks for Bricks settings. It gets confusing with terminology overlapping like this. There's a lot of cases of that where things like sections and containers and things like that, where they're used in different places and have different meanings. So we're going to be very careful about how we look at that. So basically we've just created a basic theme. The conditions are everywhere and we've done nothing else at this point in time. So I'm going to go to my editor. I'm going to add in a section, and in that section I'm going to add in the container. I'm going to add in a block, another block. Actually, no, the block. I'm going to the block. Just going to add in a heading, some basic text, and a button. That's inside my block. I'm just going to duplicate my block, and I'm going to duplicate my container, and I'm going to duplicate my section. Okay, so we had basically two wrappers set up. So we've got a section with a container, we've got a block inside of that which has a heading, basic text, and button. We've replicated that. We've then replicated that entire container, and then we've replicated that entire section so we can see what we've got to work with. And by default, you will see in here we have no spacing set up. So if I save that and look at the front end, we have a look at the front end and we have a look at our section here. So on a section, the section has no top and bottom padding, no side padding. Our inner containers basically have our default bricks, which is set to a box width of 1100 pixels wide, and it just keeps the container at the box width by using auto margin on the sides. We have no spacing from our content in the middle, and that's just our default settings in Bricks. What most people will do is they'll come into Bricks, they'll go into our section, they go into the style, and go into our CSS or layout. I'm just going to go to layout, and we'd link these, and we might put, say, 10 rem padding on the top and bottom, and we might put a 1 rem on the side. And notice that we've only affected this one section. We haven't affected the other section because what we're doing is we're styling with fixed values at the ID level, which means that these sections have no relationship to each other whatsoever. So this is the wrong way to do it. The next wrong way to do it is to go into your theme, go into the theme styles, into your elements and go to your section. And then in here, we would, in our padding, we might put 10 rem there. Not RM, REM. And 1 REM there. Now we've got section padding where we've got on the top and the bottom, or the block start and block end, we've got our 10 REM. And on the sides, we've got the 1 REM. Now this looks like it could make sense because it's applied to both sections because we've done it via the theme as our defaults for our section. Looks like a good idea. It is not a good idea because these fixed values are a problem. If we go to, for example, our block, and our block, we add, back to the theme styles. If we go down to our elements and go to our block, and we decide our block padding is going to be, actually, we're going to use a row gap of, say, 2 rem. All right, and we've got 2 rem padding in our blocks. We've got our margins and our paddings and top and bottom, left and right in our section. They now have no relationship to each other whatsoever because they're all fixed values. So if I decide, hey, I want to tie a padding here, I make that 1 rem padding there. It does not affect my section padding at all because they're not related in any way. So we want them to be related. To be related, we need to use variables that actually relate to each other. So this is where your CSS variables will come in. So if you were talking about a CSS variable-based framework, well, this is where that all comes in. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at what I think is the best way to do this, how frameworks that are good frameworks will work, and to give you an idea of how this all links together in the Bricks Builder itself. So we're going to go to our, up to the top left here, we're going to click on the 3, and we're going to go into our variables, and we're going to create a set of variables called space. So there's our space settings. And what we want to do is we want to create relationships between our spacings. So we don't want to just put in fixed values. We want to put in relationships. Now I'm going to start by using a couple of single fixed values as our reference point. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go and use a clamp calculator. We're going to change that to clamp so it's all fluid just by changing a single value. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is note in here, when you're creating variables in Bricks, the 2 dashes are already there. So a CSS variable starts with 2 dashes. The 2 dashes are already there, so don't type your 2 dashes or you're going to double up on those. So just type in here, and we're going to type in space, space dash, what are we going to call this? Our space dash base. And we're just going to make our space base 1 rem. Good, get confused with terminology. And there's a couple of quirks here in this as well, which have existed in Bricks since version 1.5, not the variables because they haven't existed then, but when you're dealing with colors and things like that, this editing of them is just weird, and they need to fix it up because they keep working on introducing new features to satisfy people, but they need to work on the editor making this great builder even better by just looking at the little nuances and fixing them up. So on here, if I press the Enter key, I get a space base with a 1 rem, but then it goes down to my value. So I can't start typing my next variable name. It's gone to the value, not to the name. I don't know why that is, but that's just a little quirk in here. Now, the next thing is that if I want to change that to 2 rem, I click up there, and this time it's worked. It's highlighted the whole row, and I can see a little flashing line. I can go back there, and I can go say, change that to 2 rem. Now, you would think here you press the Enter key and done. Unfortunately not. That does absolutely nothing. The same as when you're editing your colors and other brick settings, the Enter key does absolutely nothing. So what you have to do is click away from it, and then it tells you it's updated. Okay, the same with this. If I go into there, see I clicked in there, you think you're editing because it's gone yellow, but we're not editing. I click in there again. Oh, now the whole line's highlighted. I can see a flasher, and I can type in there, and then I'll press the enter key, it does nothing. So I click away, and if I've changed anything, it will save. So I'll go back to here. So I clicked it, it's not editing. Click it again, it's editing. Oh, clicked it again, it's not editing. So I've got to use my mouse or sorry, my keyboard, go back to there. It's just quirky and it needs to be fixed to keep it from frustrating people, I guess. Anyway, enough of a waffle about that. So I click away and I've got a space base of 1 rem. I'm going to create a variable called space multiplier. Excuse my slowness on this. I am a touch typist. I need to learn to type properly, but I haven't done so. I'm going to set this to 1.5, and this you'll get from using references for scales. There's all sorts of names for them, from golden ratio to perfect fifth to major third, whatever you want. They're just fancy names for values that you put here as a multiplier or divider. So I'm going to hit the enter on that. So I've got a space multiplier. Now we're going to create our first space variable, which is going to be space. And because it is a version of space, we use 2 dashes, and we're going to do XS. Actually, we'll start with S. Now, I'm using the BEM class naming convention methodology here. It just makes sense to me to keep that with the variable. So what I'm saying here is I've got a type of variable called space, but this is a variation or a version of that. So the 2 dashes are telling me that this is a version. So my space S, I'm going to just do that as a variable, and we don't have any type ahead in bricks. We do once we create the variables, but at this point, we don't have a type ahead, so we have to do it ourselves. So you dash dash. I'm going to call this space base. Okay. You might wonder, why do we bother? Why don't we just create a space S and then divide that up? It just makes sense. If that's at the top there, that's our base. This is our multiplier, and then everything else is a more complex calculation. And this is one of the things that is annoying me about the editor. It just puts this stuff, I don't know if it's in alphabetical order or what it's doing, but it just reorganizes itself, which is, I don't want that. I want this to go in the order that I put it in, but it just decides I'm going to reorganize that. So that's a really frustrating little thing that it does. I'm going to go back up here and I'm going to copy and here. If I click in here and I try and use my mouse to select it, I can't. So I just got to go in there. Oh, there we go. Control A, there we go, copy. So they've really messed up this editing. So I'm going to change that to space XS. And then we want this to be a calculation of our calc of our var. I'll put in a space there. Var of, what do we got? The space base. Actually, we're going to use the, we're going to multiply out the, we'll divide out the actual, what we call them, the variations or versions. So I'm going to do space S divided by var space multiplier. And you notice in the space multiplier, I don't have 2 dashes because there's only one thing. The space multiplier is the thing. It's not a version of it. It's the thing we want. A space dash dash S. The S is a version of space. Okay. So that's it. And then we're going to do our space M. I'm going to copy this whole Control A, Control C, copy that, paste it in there. And that one there is going to be multiplied. So our space M is our base. Sorry, our space M is our small multiplied by a multiplier. Our space XS is our small divided by a multiplier. The rest of them, we're only going down one level. The rest of them, we're going to keep going up. So I'm going to do a Control A, copy that to clipboard. I'm going to do my space L, paste that in there, and the space L will be my space M times my multiplier. Okay, I'm going to do space XL. That's going to be my space L times the multiplier. You get the picture? So once we've set this up, you can just keep going up, and that's no problem at all. So we're going to, oops, wrong one. 2XL. and that's going to be my XL times my multiplier. And this is another one. There's there's conversations around whether you use XXL, XXXL, or use 2XL, 3XL. I like this notation here, so that's what I use. We'll do the 3XL, and that will be our 2XL times the multiplier. And let's do a space 4XL. And that will be our space 3XL times the multiplier. Okay, so you get the gist. We using these. Now later on, if I want to change this to a clamp, I have to change this one value. If I want to change the relationship between my sizes, so how much it scales between each size, I will change the multiplier. So I have to change these two values, and I can affect all of these down here. Now what we'll do is create what they call contextual variables here to use so they make more sense when we're using them. One of them that we're going to use is our section padding block. So that's the top and bottom padding. So section padding block, and we're just going to have as a var of our space. Let's go with the 3XL for that for the moment. And we'll leave that. And then we want a, see how I just stuck that up there? I wish it wouldn't do that, but it does. That's annoying. Really, really annoying. Thomas, if you ever see any of my stuff, fix this stuff because it gets frustrating. Okay. Okay. Now what else do we want? We want a gutter. So we want the we don't want the size of our content to touch the screen on smaller devices. So once we get below 1100 pixels, which is the default here, we want some gutter on the sides, and that's the term they use is for gutter. It's an old term, and we want that just to be a var of space S, I reckon, for now. We can always come back and change that. All right, so we've got some padding, we've got some gutter. Now, the other thing we need is some spacing variables. So what we want to do is look at, I'm going to just save that for now. Now, if we look at our content here, we've got sections. In our sections, we've got containers inside of our sections, right? And then we've got inside of our sections, in this particular case, we've got blocks. Okay, and inside our blocks, we've got some content. So we want to step that down a little bit. So we want to start with a bigger gap between our containers, a smaller gap between our blocks, and then a smaller gap between our content. So I'm going to start with the content and decide what that will be first by going into our variables here, into our space, and I'm going to say I want content gap. Okay, content gap, and the content gap we want to be, I'm going to say it's going to be our space M. Space medium. All right. Now I like with my content gap, sometimes you're going to use content in cards where you want the, or layouts where you want them to be more, or you want them to be a little bit less. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say content gap. So the content gap is the thing. The variation or the version is a dash dash small. Okay, and that is going to be our calc of our var dash dash content gap divided by, let's just say divided by 2. So our content gap small is going to be half of our half of our content gap. Or we can use, if we want to keep this consistent, let's do it the multiply, divided by var. We'll keep it consistent. Okay, so we keep keeping our relationship between our gaps consistent by doing that, okay? So we copy all that to the clipboard. So we can do the next one. We're going to do our content gap large. Paste that in there, and we're just going to say that that's multiplied by that. Now, you might think, well, we've already got spacing variables that do exactly the same thing. Well, what happens if you decide we want this to be a little bit bigger or a bit different? I'm going to multiply that by whatever or divide that by whatever. The other two sizes are automatically going to update their relationship because we've changed that one variable. If we want to change all of it, we just need to change this space base and the space multiplier, which Bricks is now reorganized for me. Thank you. Anyway, so we've got those there. So we want our content gap as our starting point, which our content gap will be the content, like for example, within this block here. We now want the container to space out the direct children, in this case, their blocks. So we're going to change that as well, or set up some variables at least to do that. And we'll come back into our space, and we want to put in we'll call this our container gap. No, we'll call that our section gap first, because our section gap is our gap between our children in the section, which will be containers normally. Section gap, and we're going to make that our var. So because we made our content gap M, I'm going to make the section gap, actually we'll go upwards. I'm going to go, sorry, I'm all over the place here. We'll call this our container gap. So this is the gap within the container, and we're going to go the next one up from our content gap. So we're going to call this a space dash L. Okay, and then we're going to go up from there. So we're going to go to our container gap, to our section gap. Section gap is going to be our var space XL. All right, so we're going upwards as we go further up. But there's our spacing, I believe, done for a basic setup, right? So not overly complicated. We haven't done anything too flashy here yet. We're just going to save that, and nothing's changed here yet because all we've done is created some variables that we can use. Now let's go into the theme, go into our theme settings, and what are we going to do? We're going to go to our elements. Let's start from the block there. We're going to put in our block, we're going to put in our, what do we call this? The content gap. And we're going to put that in as our column gap as well as our row gap. And I'll show you why when I get to grids. And automatically, we see we have some spacing inside of our blocks to space out our content. All right, so we're going to go up the chain now. We're going to go to the container. And what we're going to do is here, we're just going to do the row gap of being our container gap. Yeah, what are we on, the container? Yep. So we're going to use the container gap as our gap there. And now we've spaced out our containers that are in there. And we're going to go up again, go to the section. And on the section, we're not going to put gap in the section. We're going to use padding. We're going to link these sides. We're going to get our section padding, block. We're going to go to our sides here. We're going to use our gutter. Our gutter on the sides here. And we did actually create a row gap for section, didn't we? So we're going to create that in. So we go into the section. I don't think I'd ever use this, but I'm going to put it in there just so you can see how that actually works. Now we've got a bunch of spacing. All right. And it is consistent across our entire website because we've made some variables and we've stuck them into the thing. Now I'm going to create some borders just so we can see what's going on. So I'm going to call this my section border. We're just going to get rid of these a little bit later anyway. I'm just going to go into my border. 2 pixels. Solid, and we'll just use the built-in colors. Maybe use orange. No, we won't go solid. We'll go dashed. And that is my section gap. Okay, so we can see we've got a section there. So I'll just add it to this one here as well. Section border. Okay, actually the gap doesn't work there because we don't have sorry, I'm going to get rid of that. Go back to my theme styles. That was an oversight. The sections don't have, yes they do, sorry. They have the gap between the containers. So the section gap will be the gap between the containers. So if we look in there and we put in a section gap, that's the gap between our containers. That's correct. Our sections don't have a gap between each other because they're at the root level and they don't have a flex or display a grid. All right, so we go to our container. Let's create a container border. And we'll make this a 2 pixel dashed, and we'll make this a blue color. So there's our container. Another container. Okay, we won't worry about the marking up the bottom one, or should we? I think we should probably actually, yeah. KR. There's our container border. So we can see that we have padding top and bottom, and we've got a gap between them using the row gap. And we've got some spacing in here. Let's do the same on blocks. Let's do our block border. We're going to delete these when we're done anyway. This is just so we can see what's going on. And we'll make this a 2 pixel. I'll make it a dotted and make it maybe this, or what have we got here? Maybe this greenish color. Okay, so let's have a look on the front end. What we have is these two have no spacing between them. Why do they have no spacing? So if we go to our blocks, our container, where's our container? Let's have a look at our containers in here. It has container gap. Let's see what's going on. Let's have a look at the front end. I should have. We go up to DOM here. We should get to a container. It has got the container. So the container's got the gap there. And then we've got the blocks. Another block there. So it does actually have it. Just for some reason, tell you what it is. I forgot. I added the block border to that one. I forgot to add the block border to that one. So we couldn't see what was going on. Okay, there we go. Now we can see all of our spacing in there. So we've got a padding block on our section. We've got a row gap on our container, which is separating these blocks. We've got a row gap inside of our blocks, which is separating our content, and that is all ready to go. Okay, now let's say, for example, we decide we want this to be responsive. Let's go back to our builder, go back into, we'll actually go to a clamp, find a clamp generator. Let's go to a clamp generator. There's heaps of these. I'm just going to check this one out here. That'll do. So minimum viewport width, we'll do 380 pixels, maximum at 1100. Actually, we'll make that 1300. Minimum font size, we're going to go in RAM. So minimum font size, actually no, we'll do it in pixels. We'll do it in pixels because it'll convert to RAM anyway. So our minimum font size is going to be on a desktop. This isn't font size. This is for fonts. We're going to use this for spacing. Does exactly the same thing. So for spacing, let's say at our minimum size, we want our gap small to be 10 pixels. Okay. On a large screen, we want that to be 20 pixels. There is our font clamp. There's our clamp, sorry, which is the REMs in there. So I'm just going to grab that clamp. We're not using font size. We're going to get back over to our editor here. Going to go to our variables. Here we go. It's our variable space. We're going to set our base space to be a clamp, not the font size. Actually, so what I mean by this editor, you click in there and you try and click again and it messes you up, so you've got to use your keyboard to get back. Okay, and then we're going to click away. If I do anything different, I'm not going to save that setting. So now we have a clamp for our space. Let's save that. Let's have a look on the front end now and watch these variables. So if I look at my computed size for my padding, I've got 94.92. If I reduce my size, you can see the padding is there, is 94.92. Get down, get down, get down. I can see my padding is not changed. Why is that changed? There's changing now. I must have messed up on that. Let's have a look over here. What do I do with that clamp size? This does not look correct. I'm going to use a different clamp generator. Let's try that. Use this one. Pix input unit, Pix REM. What is this saying here? We've got a question mark, but here we go. Layout, select the desired layout spacing property. I'm not even bothered with that. So let's just see. Yeah, that's actually probably the values we want. So at that, let's say output unit, we're going to go REMs. The font size is say 10. Let's copy that to the clipboard, back to our builder. Going to go into figure out why. I'm just going to grab a different generator. So let's go back to our space. Again, double click and it does nothing. So I've got to use my backspace, paste that in, click somewhere else, save. Come on. Okay, there we go. Just refresh just to make sure we've got it. I'm going to look at my section. I'm going to look at the side padding. So we've got padding on the side here of 14,835. If we go above 1200 pixels wide, we've got padding of 20. If we go down to below 320, at 320, we've got a padding of 10. So our font, and you notice the padding at the top or your block start changes there, as well as your padding or your line, your gap in there. Let's have a look at the gap. Row gap. There's our row gap of 20.99. Go down, that's changing to 19. Go up, it's changing to 25, 27, 30. So all of this is fully responsive, and all we had to do was change one clamp value, which was that. If we want to change the relationship, let's say we want a bigger relationship. So I'm going to change that to say 1.6. I think that's a golden ratio, something like that. Change that there. And we have a look here. Now, what we've done is we've created a greater relationship between our padding sizes. So if you look at that there, we've got a certain amount at the top there. Got that much padding at the top there. If I go back and I change that to say 1.3, there, save that. When that refreshes, we've got a much less padding at the top here because we've made it a lot tighter by changing our relationship between all the spacing, but just by changing one single value. So effectively, all of our spacing, the consistency of our spacing across the entire website comes down to these two values, the multiplier and the space base, which we've got down as a clamp now. So that is the these done, right? We've done our spacing and we've got something that we can start working with to keep consistent. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear all this out. I'm going to just create a new section and see we've got everything we want there. I'm going to put inside there a block. And on that block, I'm going to turn that block into a grid. And in that grid, I'm going to set that. We haven't actually set grids yet. We now need to create some grids. So let's create a grid. I'm just going to do one FR, and we've got a 2-column grid, and we've automatically got our our spacing in there without actually putting anything here because it is defaulting, because we're inside of a block, it defaults to the block defaults, which is in here, and the block defaults say that we have, and this is a bug with bricks, I have none of my flex properties here, so I'm going to hit the save, hit a Control F5 to reload this. These are the kind of little things that bricks need to be working on rather than new features, I think, because the editor's great, but there are certainly some things that need improving, and that's what they should be working on, because these things have existed for a long time. So if I go into what we're looking at, the block, I can now see no, I still can't see my flex properties in there, even though I'm on flex. Okay, try Control F5 again. We're going to settings now. Theme styles, elements, block, and there, presto, I've got my flex settings back here. So, and this has got no plugins installed, so you can't blame any other plugins. This is purely a bricks bug. So because I've got my content gap for my column gap and for my row gap, when I add a block into here and turn that into a grid, if I added another block here, I will get the third block. Add it again. What have I done? What changed that to be a grid? No. There we go. It was just the editor again, playing up with how it was displaying things. So because I've got 3 blocks in there, I can see my spacing, both the column and the row, because there's 3 blocks there. Okay. All right, so there is a simple setup. Now, what we're going to do now is look at the grids. So you'd never do this. You'd never do 1FR, 1FR, because that is just asking for trouble, because that's going to create overflow issues in certain circumstances. So what we're going to do is we're going to use what we probably should use, which is a min-max of 0 pixels and then 1 FR. So what the min-max does is it says that we can be a minimum of 0 pixels and a maximum of 1 fraction. Okay. The reason we do that is if we don't, it assumes that it assumes that our minimum size is the auto size, which is the browser calculating the contents and working out what size it should be, and that can affect your grids and your flex and whatnot. So the best way to do this is say you can be as small as 0 pixels, don't auto try and calculate this. Okay, if we wanted 2 of those, we would then use the repeat 2, comma. So now we have a 2-column grid, but we don't want to be typing this every time, do we? So we need to create some variables. So I'm going to cut that out, go back to my variables here. I'm going to create a new category called grid, and we're going to create a new one called grid dash dash. This is a version, a grid of 1. Oops, I just pressed the enter key. So I'm going to click back in there, put it there, and on a version of 1, on a version of 1 again, click away, and it just does weird shit. Okay, so we've got a min-max of 0, 1FR for our grid 1. Grid 2 is going to be our repeat 2 of the min-max 0, 1FR. If I press the enter key, it goes down to our value, not to our variable name. So we're going to go back to here. I'm just going to do grid 3 and then paste that in there. And all I've got to do is change that 1 number. Okay, did that even save? I don't know. Press the enter key. So we've got 3 grids here now. So I'm going to save that. Come back here, and now all I have to do is start typing grid. And how many do we want? We want a grid of 2. Now, this is not taking into account your responsiveness. There's a lot more you want to do, and this is where frameworks would have more properties in this. So you have auto grids and all that sort of stuff. This is a very simplistic perspective, okay? So we've got a block there now. So we've got a grid, we've got some variables for that. And in that block, I am going to add some content. That's going to be my heading, basic text button. We got that in there. And that went inside this block, which we've accidentally set to a grid. Take that out. So that should be just content with our automatic content gap that's coming from the theme, which we set previously. So we go to this one. And I think I must have duplicated that. I did. Let's get rid of that. So in that one there, I'm going to add an image. An image there, and that image, we're just going to go off to our select image here. We're just going to go off to instant images. Just grab the first one that we find. So maybe it's this guy on the beach here. Set that. Now we decide we want to actually have some radii. We don't want these square-edged images, these sharp-edged images. We want some radii. So what are we going to do? We're going to create some radii. So we go back to our variables, go into there. We're going to create radii. And our radii, we're going to create the first one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to base it on my space. So I'm going to say my radii is going to be, I'm going to start with space M, because we like having a bit of radius here. So let's just go into the radii. And we're going to say radius, small. And it's going to be our variable of dash dash, whoops, space M. We're going to base it on the space, okay? Then we're going to go to radius. Oops. Let's do a radius of small. Okay, what are we going to do with our, medium? So we do a radius of medium. And I'm going to use, just to keep it consistent. So if we change our spacing, maybe change the radius, I'm going to go back to my space. I'm going to get the space multiplier. Grab that word there. I'm going to multiply it up by that. So I'm going to go calc. Space multiplier times val of radius S. Close that off. Okay, and then we're going to go to our radius L. Put our calc in there, but in this case, we're going to do our radius M. Oops, sorry. I messed that up. So this should be, let's do that again. Radius, we want there to be our space multiplier. Space multiplier times our of radius M. Okay, so we can go radius XL by multiplying up our radius L. So we've got 3 radii. All right, so there's our image. If we want to set the image border radius, we can go to the background here, border radius, link those all together, and just type radius. And we want the radius medium. There's our radius medium, and the radius small. There's our radius small. We want the radius large. There's our radius L. Did that work? Why isn't our radius L work? Radius L. We've got a problem here. So if I go to radius M, that works. Radius L does not work. So let's have a look at our variable. Radius L is our calc. There we go, typo. Here, if I hit save there, it does nothing. So I've got to click away, make sure it's updated, and hit the save button. So little editing quirks that you need to be aware of. So back to our image. If I go to radius L, that's now working. So now we've got some variables for radius. So what we have now is a setup where I can get rid of all this. So I can go and create a new section. In that section, I can put a block in there. I can make that block a grid. I can make it a grid of 2. Whoops, capitals. Grid of 2. I can then go. The editor not updated. Okay. I'm then going to add a block inside there. Oh my goodness, my mouse is just playing up something chronic here. So I'm going to add a block, another block. And my grid of 2 just messed up. What happened to my grid of 2? Inside my block, I've got a grid. I've got it on the rows. Sorry. Template columns, grid of 2. And now there's my blocks there. Okay, so I've got some content I can put inside my block. So I'm just going to maybe go, let's stick in that's just what we did before, maybe a heading, rich text, and a text link. Okay, and in the right-hand side, I'm going to stick in there a media. So I'm going to put in an image. And there's my image there. And I'm going to select an image. I'm not going to do any other styling at this stage. In fact, I'm going to go back a step here. I'm going to go back a step and do what we should do if you're going to use these properly. And using them properly, I'm thinking you should be using classes and you should be using them as a standard methodology, which I'm going to use BEM methodology. So let's get rid of all I've just done there and add that back in. So we got a section and we're going to call this our demo section. Now, because we don't have a automatic CSS or advanced theme, we have to create our class names manually. I'm going to copy that to the clipboard. So that is our top level block is our demo section. Inside that is a container. So I'm going to call that my demo container. So to container element in BEM is underscore underscore. Okay, inside that container, we're going to add a block. I'll call that my grid. And inside my grid, I'm going to add another block, 2 blocks. That'll be my content. Oops. Content wrapper. And here, require a content wrapper. Keep these names consistent. So this will be our image wrapper or media wrapper. Okay, there's our media wrapper. Inside of our content, we're going to stick a we're going to do a heading, basic text. Our laptop that's actually running slow for some reason. So we're going to name these as the lead and the CTA button. And did we stick an image in there? I don't think we did. Let's stick an image in there. And we'll call that our featured image or feature image. Okay, so do we do our media wrapper? I think we did. We did. Do we go back to our heading? We did that. No, we didn't. Heading. Lead, we did. CTA button, we did. So we got a content wrapper, heading, lead, CTA button, media wrapper. And now, let's go and start putting some stuff in there now. So we're going to go to our grid. I just want to quickly go through this and how most people might use this. So my grid, I'm going to basically start typing grid. Oops, here's another beginner mistake with bricks. By default, when you click on these elements, it does not select the class, it selects the ID. We want to make sure that when we click on these, we select the class so that we're putting our styles on the class. Okay, so we're going to change that to be a grid, and we're going to type a grid of 2. There's our 2-column grid. Okay, we're then going to go to our media and style. You actually style this up however you want it to style it up. So this here, we're just going to grab that image again. Okay, and then we're going to make sure we've selected the feature image. Go to our border. We're going to set our border as our border radius as radius medium. So we've got a medium radius around our border there. And we're starting to style up a card, right? So if I go to this content wrapper now, I can go to the make sure I've got that selected, and I can align my items to the center there. And we're starting to see something that we can actually use. Now I'm going to put a background on here just to be, will we use our demo section? I think we'll select the class. No, we won't. We're going to do this at the ID level because we're going to create a copy of this and we want to have a different background. So we do it at the ID level, and we're going to set a background, and we're going to set that background to be maybe this light gray here. We're going to duplicate this whole thing out. We're going to grab our container and our media, go to media wrapper, and at the ID level, we're going to go into our settings. I'm not sure where they are in here because I normally do this at the using the CSS. So is it here? Is it here? Is there an order? Is there an order here? We'll set our order. Maybe it's on the content here. There we go. Order. Set that to -1. So we're sticking that on the other side. We'll pick a different image. Okay, so a different image, change our background here to be a different background. Like I said, lime green color, whatever. There we go. So we've got some ugly layout here, but we've got consistency. Now, what we've done now is we've created a consistent map of everything. So if I wanted to change the way these border radiuses work on all of these feature images, I would go back to one of those. So I go to this feature image here. I would make sure that's selected. I'll go to my border, and the border here, I'm going to change that to be L. Now all of them change. Well, I'm going to change that to be S. I want them to change to small. So now all of them change to small. Okay, maybe I want to put a border on it. I'll go into 2 pixels, solid, and let's pick this white. Let's click actually we'll go to a black, and we'll make it a little bit transparent. Kind of a glass effect on the side there of that, okay? Or we might want to add a box shadow or whatever. Now, because we've done that, it's adding it to all of these images at the same time. Now, let's say we go in there and we decide we want our spacing to be more. And now we go back into our variables, go into our space, and we say we want our space calculation to be a little bit bigger. So we either want it to be right from the beginning, we want our space calculation to be a bit bigger, or we want it to scale up to be bigger. So I might just change the scale to be 1.5. Okay, save that. And now we'll see we got more spacing. The content space, you may be able to tell the content space grew more. The space above it, the padding at the top grew more. The side padding grew. Everything grew because we decided to change that scale. Or we can go into that variable there. We can put that back to where it was. I think we have on 1.3. Okay, and we're just going to do a different calculation. Let's go back into that calculator. Let's say we want to change that to be 20 on mobile and 35 on a desktop. Copy that. Go back to our builder here. Go into the space. have to use the backspace here because the editor's crap. Okay, click on that, save that. So we put that back to 1.5, but we're now going from, instead of from 10 to 20, we're going from 10 to 35. We've just changed the basis spacing on that. So we've got a lot more spacing on everything, okay, because we've changed that quite considerably. So we might come back and say, okay, let's change that spacing a bit. So instead of being 1.5, I want generally bigger spacing, but I don't want as big a notice between the steps. So go back to there. Okay, so now we've got a bigger minimum spacing, but we've reduced the distance between the spaces to change that. So we're just changing variables and we change the entire website. Let's look at our image here. Actually, let's just do a different, just going to add another section in here. I'm just going to show you another thing we can do with our radius, for example. So I'm going to grab another box, put it in there, a block, and we're going to make that a grid, and we'll make that a grid of 3. 3. Put some blocks in there. And on that block, did that work? No, block. Sorry, I'm used to using advanced CMF for this. So on that block, I'm just going to actually put something inside it. So we've got something, maybe some basic text inside it. And then we're going to put a background on it. Oh, maybe it's blue. And then we're going to set a radius. Still is the ID level, by the way. So I'm just going to go in there and we're going to set my radius to be radius small. I'm going to duplicate that. We need a bit more text in there to really pad it out. And maybe with some padding in there as well. Let's put some padding in there. So using our variables, link all sides, and we're going to use a space of medium space. Put a medium space in there. Okay. So that's our space. What do we do for the border? I think we put in radius S, block. So on the second block, I'm going to set that one to be a radius medium. And on the third one, we're going to make that one a radius. So it looks like I might have messed something up here. L. So my small and medium don't look much. Oh, they are different. They are different. It's just because it's scaling by 1.3, which is I think we set our space here. It's 1.3. We did. It's only 1.3 difference between them. So that's why it's like that. So let's go to our radii and say we want our smallest one to be based on S, not on medium. Save that. Have a look at our radii now. So that's smaller, that's a bit bigger, and that's a bit bigger. If we want huge radius, we can actually go into there. This is going to look crazy, but we'll go into there and go to our radii. And we're going to set our small size to be our space large. And our smallest is space large. Then we got a bigger radius, and then we got a bigger radius again. So the point here being is that you end up with a single point of truth here, where in your spacing, I only need to change my space multiplier and my base space. That's all I have to change, and the whole site responds to that. In my radii, I just have to change my space S, and everything responds to that. Now, taking this to the nth degree, you would then start doing the same thing for topography. I'm not going to go into that because this video is already an hour, but that kind of hopefully gives you an indication of how these frameworks get built up, how they relate to bricks, where they go in the theme settings, and how they affect the overall layout of your website. So I'm going to leave it at that because that's an awful lot to go through, and hopefully that helps some of you guys to understand why you should be using a framework. My recommendation is don't do this. Use a proper framework like ACSS, like Core Framework, like ATF, and that all this will be done for you, and it'll be much, much, much more consistent for you. So, all right, I'm going to leave it at that. Thanks for listening.